7 things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Sunday 7.
I'm Ciara Evans in for Jamie East this week, and on today's episode of the award-winning Sunday 7, we take a look back at some of the biggest stories in science and tech from 2025. We'll be hearing about Australia's mushroom murders, investigate Donald Trump's battle with Tylenol, and we hear about some medical marvels. Plus, we'll Guyatt the Smart 7's resident tech guru recaps his biggest stories of the year, including some celebs in space spotting. If you're enjoying our episodes, please do like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We're here 7 days a week at 7 a.m. with the 7 biggest stories on the Smart 7 in association with Metro. Before we get started though, it was on this day in 2004 that the Mars rover Spirit landed on the Red Planet with a brief to analyse the rocks and surface in search for signs of water. It also took the only photo of Earth ever taken from another planet, or at least as far as we know. As we look back through the big stories of science and tech, there's one story that stands out as an old-fashioned murder mystery, and that's the case of the poisoned beef Wellington that captured the world's interest in July. We took a look in detail at the deadly mushrooms that Australian woman Anne Pringle was found guilty of using to murder 3 of her relatives and the attempted murder of a 4th. The murder weapon? Beef Wellington. The extraordinary story has been covered all over the world, and no surprise when someone cooks a meal designed to kill her in-laws and ex-husband. We took a closer look at the deadly mushroom that Anne Pringle used to commit her crime. The death cap mushroom is the deadliest mushrooms for humans, and it's responsible for most cases of mushroom poisoning worldwide, some of which are fatal. The official name for the death cap mushroom is Amanita phalloides, and they are saturated with deadly chemicals known as amatoxins, which can cause diarrhea and vomiting and ultimately necrosis, organ failure and death. Detective Inspector Dean Thomas of the Victoria Police was one of the investigators on the case, and he put the poisoning into context.
3 people have died, and we've had a person that nearly died and was seriously injured as a result, and that has led to these charges. I ask that we acknowledge those people and not forget them.
But what is it that makes them so deadly? Dr. Anne Pringle is a mycologist and botanist who specialises in the death cap mushroom, and she explained to the World Extreme Medicine podcast what makes the fungi so dangerous.
Death caps kill people easily, and what they do very specifically is there are toxins within the death cap that stop protein synthesis. So death caps stop your RNA polymerase II from working, and if your RNA polymerase II doesn't work, then you start to have organ failure in the organs that are cleaning out your blood. But basically, as your organs shut down, you die. And it has a very strange and sad pattern of illness where someone will eat a death cap, they'll have vomiting, they'll have diarrhea, then they'll recover. There's this grace period, and you recover maybe after 6 or 8 hours, but then 6 or 8 hours after that, you get very sick again, and that's typically when people go to the hospital. And then, from there, a number of things can happen, but death is a likely outcome of eating a death cap.
Dr. Greg Moore is a senior research associate at Burnley College in the University of Melbourne, and he says you really need to be careful if you're hoping to do any mushroom foraging.
You've got to know what you're looking for. When you go out foraging for mushrooms, you don't go out thinking, I hope I find a mushroom and that's the one I'll grab. You want to know what you're after. It's not that common for people to die from mushroom poisoning here, but it does happen from time to time.
So how do you identify and ideally avoid the death cap mushroom on a forest walk? Lewis is a chef and YouTuber who runs the UK Wildcraft channel, and he has some useful tips.
They grow in mixed woodlands, especially near oak trees, and you'll mostly see them popping up after heavy rain from July through to November. They're a colour between olive green and yellow, and I think they've got an almost metallic looking colour to them. As they mature, you'll often get a darker colouring towards the centre of the cap. An important feature for death caps and most amanitas is this, the vulva. It's an egg-shaped sac which the mushroom erupted from. This vulva is often found just below the ground, so when you're harvesting edible mushrooms, you need to check the base of the stem to make absolutely sure you haven't accidentally picked a death cap.
We're busy looking back at some of the biggest science and tech stories of the year in the first of our Sunday 7 2025 specials. One man who's always up to speed on the latest tech news, whatever month it is the Smart 7's tech guru, Will Guyatt. Well, we've asked you to pick out some more of your favourite stories from 2025 on tech. What caught your eye?
We're living through this one right now as we've been warned that we're in the midst of a potential AI bubble, and businesses are being massively overvalued and investors have been smoking the hopium, with many of the big AI bets looking unlikely to ever match up to their predictions. We've had warnings from the Bank of England and various senior US economists, but over the last few weeks the Trump administration has been hyping the hell out of AI's transformative potential.
If it is a bubble, are we in trouble?
Well, I've been doing this long enough to have lived through the dot-com bubble, which happened in the early 2000s, and it massively disrupted the global economy for years after, and also changed people's attitudes to tech, and stopped many really incredible ideas and businesses from succeeding. If AI collapses, we'll see economies around the world sinking, as the demand for AI tech and infrastructure has been keeping economies in the US and China racing, and if they go wonky, we'll all be in significant trouble too.
Apart from the fear of a catastrophic financial collapse, the internet has been, well, a bit wonky this year, hasn't it?
We had several large outages in 2025, and it's all been around issues related to Cloudflare and Amazon Web Services, two of around 5 major companies that keep the internet online. Most of the issues have been caused by nothing more sinister than failed software updates and a bad day in the office for engineer Jeff in Tennessee. But it shows that when a failure happens, it impacts many of us around the world. The problems were caused by an issue related to something called the DNS, or domain name system, and that's essentially the phone book of the internet. And the best way to describe it is that someone tore the old phone book in half for a while, so websites couldn't successfully connect to their web addresses. And that's a pretty large problem, which at one point took around 25% of working websites down. And that didn't happen once, it happened 3 times in 2025.
Are there just too many people online, or is it more to do with too little competition in big tech?
It is no exaggeration to say that the internet is creaking at the seams, but it's more about the extreme costs of all this stuff, which means the infrastructure has essentially become operated by around 5 different businesses now. Back in the day, most big companies used to have their own warehouse full of servers and engineers, but companies can save significant amount of money by switching these to cloud services. It also means, though, that they have little or no resilience or backup, as we've seen with these failures. And the reality is, we need to expect the internet to get less and less reliable unless something can be done to improve its resilience and have backups for all of these services that we rely on. And it's not quite as simple as it might look.
Australia has been to the forefront in trying to get teens off social media. How's that gone?
This only came into effect in early December, so it's hard to tell. We've not yet had any fines to tech companies, and none of the big businesses are threatened to flounce out of Australia because of the law. The work of the Australian government to ban under-16s from social media will either prove to be a short-sighted and failed experiment, or will single-handedly have transformed the lives of young people forever. The country is like a massive science experiment right now, and the rest of us are watching on with great interest.
And the UK's Online Safety Act, has it been successful this year?
Just like in Australia, it's pretty early to say just how successful this has been, but based on the number of people using VPNs in the UK who've signed up to avoid age verification on porn sites, you could argue that it's definitely had an impact of sorts. Pornhub itself said at one point that around 1.5 million fewer Brits were using its services every month, but it is not apparent how many of those people are currently pretending they are in Stockholm rather than Swindon when looking at their legal porn. And for those grumping about the Online Safety Act, the founding principles of protecting young people online are hard to argue with, and much of the noise around this is just noise.
And finally, this year has seen space become a hot topic, but not because of science, in part because of celebrities. Who's been spotted in low Earth orbit this year?
If you told me on January the 1st last year that Katy Perry would be singing Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World in almost space, I'd have thought you'd been drinking. But with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos now seemingly blasting fee-paying celebs into lower orbit, I guess anything is now possible. And given that every rocket into space is hugely damaging for our environment, I'm not sure how long our collective appetite will continue for this space ego-tourism, but maybe I'm just being grumpy because I'll never have the cash or the waistline to fit into one of those funky spacesuits. The race into space is going to get even hotter in 2026 as the US are warming up to send a rocket to do a lap of the moon, akin to me doing the Trowbridge Town Centre loop in my Ford Fiesta back in the day. The space race is back, baby.
Still to come on the Sunday 7 in association with Metro, we catch up on the Oceangate inquiry and find out why Donald Trump became obsessed with Tylenol. August saw the anniversary of the tragic events surrounding Oceangate and the Titan submersible, which failed dramatically on an expedition to the wreck of the Titanic. The story captivated the world with an extensive search and rescue operation mounted after the Oceangate sub lost contact with their base shortly after it began its dive. The story ended in tragedy, with 5 people losing their lives, including Oceangate's CEO Stockton Rush, British explorer Hamish Harding, French explorer Paul-Henri Nargeolet, and British tycoon Shahzada Darwood and his son Sohnlein. August saw the official US Coast Guard report published on the incident, and it was pretty damning, as Jason Neubauer, the chair of the Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation, explains.
This incident was, from the board's view, absolutely preventable. And when we looked at the evidence, the board feels it was actually predictable. If somehow the master of the vessel had survived this incident, the board feels that that would have raised to a level that should be looked at for seaman's manslaughter.
The report was over 300 pages long, and it directly blames the sub's parent company Oceangate and its CEO Stockton Rush for breaking and ignoring safety standards. Oceangate offered its condolences to the families of those who died and noted that it has now fully wound down operations. Dick Barton is a former vice president and director of operations for the RMS Titanic, the company which salvaged the site of the wreck. And he had previously worked with French explorer Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who died on the submarine. He told Sky News that the CEO's insistence on using carbon fibre for the body of the sub was catastrophic.
The engineering structure was flawed from the minute it started off. Titanium spheres are used by both the French and the Russians and other submersibles around the world and have been used for years. It's a proven factor that physics will work and operate at those depths with a round or spherical shape. Anything that's straight, and carbon fibre is a clue, if it's a fibre, as long as the fibre is broken, it cannot be refixed. And sadly, that was probably the point of the demise.
There was one voice speaking out in defence of Stockton Rush, the Oceangate CEO, and that was his co-founder and fellow ocean explorer Guillermo Sohnlein, who said Rush had a bigger vision for ocean exploration.
He was really driven by an altruistic drive to help humanity, to help save our planet. If there's any hubris involved, I think it's because he felt that he had finally come up with a solution that would help give humans greater access to our oceans. And I think that's what was driving him, and that was the sense of urgency that he had to kind of push forward.
In September of this year, Donald Trump and his Secretary of Health, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., took centre stage with a long-awaited announcement on what they said was an investigation into the causes of autism. US President Donald Trump made some strange choices when appointing his cabinet for his second term, but one of his oddest choices was to place Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a position to determine what happens to America's health. RFK Jr. is a genuine eccentric, a vaccine conspiracist, and a man who once tied the head of a whale to his car to transport it home from the beach. His reign as Secretary of Health has been difficult, with senior scientists fired or resigning from America's key institutions and rollbacks on vaccines, including a ban on using the breakthrough mRNA vaccine technology. September saw RFK Jr. and Trump turn their attention to autism, determined to solve the issue. It's an incredibly complex question, but they settled on an already debunked theory that a drug called acetaminophen is responsible for autism when taken by pregnant women. In the US, it's known as Tylenol, and Monday saw a White House press conference with Donald Trump issuing alarming non-scientific medical advice.
Nothing bad can happen, it can only good happen. But with Tylenol, don't take it. Don't take it.
There was considerable alarm from medical experts about the intervention, and Kate Brinthworth, the Chief Midwifery Officer for NHS England, was quick to respond with a message for pregnant mothers.
I want to reassure you, paracetamol is the first choice of painkiller if you're pregnant and is still considered the safest choice of pain relief during pregnancy. It's commonly taken during pregnancy and does not harm your baby. There's no evidence that taking paracetamol during pregnancy causes autism in children.
Dr. Deborah Howery is the former Chief Medical Officer and Deputy Director of Programme and Science at America's CDC, and she says she's alarmed at the lack of evidence behind a presidential announcement.
I think, unfortunately, the president is getting his medical advice from Secretary Kennedy, who has said you shouldn't take medical advice from him. You know, I certainly think it's important to look at the causes of autism. There's been some studies about Tylenol that show there might be an association, and there's been some that show that there's not an association. And the most well-done study that looked at genetics and siblings did not show an association.
Well, there has been an increase in the level of diagnosis of autism. There's no evidence to suggest that there's actually been a significant increase, and no medical study has found evidence of any external factor which is causing it. Dr. Awasazi Durrani is an emergency medical physician based in Houston, Texas, and he says this kind of bad medical advice can lead to bad outcomes for patients.
I'm afraid that's going to lead to a lot of confusion for our patients. It's going to lead to patients not taking certain medications like Tylenol when they need to, and it's unfortunately just going to lead to bad patient care in an already highly fragmented and very uncertain healthcare system that we have in the United States.
Still to come on the Sunday 7, in association with Metro, we take a close look back at the UK cyber attacks and catch up on some medical marvels.
Right after this. Welcome back.
2025 has seen a string of serious cyber attacks which have caused major issues across the UK and globally. In October, Japanese brewer Oceangate admitted that it had been hit by a cyber attack which impacted its shipping and customer service in Japan. While just a couple of weeks ago, European airports were shut down by another attack. Marks & Spencer's were still struggling to recover from its extensive cyber attack which crippled its website during the summer, and it appears the same group may have targeted Jaguar Land Rover. But the latest October attack saw hackers target children's nursery group Kiddo and posted profiles of children online. Steve, whose child's data was stolen, spoke to Sky News.
It's the fact that this information is now being published on the dark web. That's the kicker for me. When I originally heard that it was a hacking incident, there's hacking incidents happening every day. But we're talking about children now, I'm starting to get rather angry with Kiddo. They've got a prime responsibility to look after our children, whether that be from physical harm or IT attack. And for me at the moment, they've completely failed that duty.
Stealing children's data is clearly an escalation of the stakes in a cyber attack, but former head of National Cyber Security Centre, Kieran Martin, has urged parents to stay calm and says the risk of any personal or physical harm to children is low. Jaguar Land Rover have been unable to get their systems fully back online and are now expecting it may take until the end of October to get everything back to normal. And Professor David Bailey from the University of Birmingham's Business School says the scale of these attacks puts businesses in a really difficult position.
It's clearly a very, very serious breach of their cybersecurity, which is taking a lot of time to unpack and get to grips with. And remember as well, car companies are much more complicated than, say, a supermarket. We saw M&S and Co-op attack recently. So getting this fixed and getting things started again is taking a long time.
Mike Bees is the managing director of a company called Genix UK who specialise in pressed metal parts for Jaguar, and he says he's had to lay off staff because the factories are still not running.
From my side of it, personally, it's slightly annoying because to grow the business and move forward is normally the reason you search for investment. I managed to search for investment because one of the main customers has had let's get this right, they've had a really bad time with the cyber attack. But because of that, I now have to pay for that. And there's no support coming from government. There's no support for the staff that I've had to lay off. There's nothing there. We're left to fight for ourselves.
Craig Jones is a former director of cybercrime at Interpol, and he says that companies are just going to have to start spending more money on protecting the online side of their businesses.
Cybersecurity challenges haven't changed over the decades, basically. There's weaknesses and vulnerabilities in systems and network, and that's people as well. So what we're facing as a global community is a real existential challenge. We are unable often to protect our communities, our businesses and our industries, and we're used to things being free in this space. So when you add a cost into cybersecurity, companies and people are looking at that cost and deciding, well, where do we invest effectively?
Apart from Donald Trump's newfound obsession with Tylenol, his administration has actually had a pretty damaging impact on America's position in terms of medical research and innovation. In particular, his strategy of cutting funding for universities that he finds too woke or that hosted protests in favour of the people of Palestine were targeted with financial penalties and in some cases lawsuits. While some of the academic institutions have reached settlements with Trump, including Columbia and Cornell, Harvard has been a notable exception. However, the cuts in grants and research funding that have followed Harvard's refusal to bend the knee have had some serious implications for research programmes. America's News show 60 Minutes zoomed in on this in November, focusing on some of the critical research programmes at Harvard that could be under threat, including a key piece of research which invented gene splicing tools to tackle hereditary diseases like muscular dystrophy. David Liu is a professor of the natural sciences at Harvard University, and he specialises in molecular biology and organic chemistry. But he said the cuts put progress in jeopardy.
Science research, at the cutting edge especially, is a slow-moving process. When you disrupt that process, it can take years. You have to hire those people back. You have to generate those samples, many of which are perishable.
It's not just a specific program. Stephen Pinker is the Johnston Family Professor of Psychology at Harvard University, and he specialises in visual cognition and developmental linguistics. And he said targeting science is a common practice of autocratic regimes.
Research works. If you want to freeze society where it is, then cripple the research enterprise. The attack on universities is a tragic blunder. For all the foibles of universities, and there are many, and I pointed them out, universities' research makes life better, massively so. Why would you want to cripple it? It's something that the United States does really, really well.
Fortunately, some of America's many billionaires are stepping into the gap, including Mark Zuckerberg, the founder and CEO of Facebook. And his wife Priscilla also run a charity called Zuckerberg Chan Initiative. They announced this week that they're refocusing their philanthropic efforts on a project called BioHub, which aims to power research on human biology with AI.
We're going all in on building BioHub as the first research organization combining frontier AI and frontier biology. We're bringing together leading AI researchers, scientists, massive compute clusters, and the largest human cell datasets to create virtual cells and virtual immune systems to help advance science. The next decade is going to be really exciting, and we think that some of humanity's biggest dreams are finally coming within reach.
Research is, of course, a pretty competitive field, and other countries will step into the gap as US universities cut or shutter projects, with the UK being one of those countries. This week saw the government announce new plans which will see testing on animals phased out, but some scientists are calling for a cautious approach. Frances Buckwell is a professor of cancer biology at Queen Mary College Hospital, London, and she said there are parts of cancer research in particular that still require some element of testing on live subjects.
Over many decades, research using animals has made a major impact on the life sciences and every treatment that we have for disease. I think the concern in the community is that this may deprioritize animal research at the expense of the alternative methods. In my own lab, working in cancer research, we've been developing alternative methods, and our use of animals has really greatly reduced. But there comes a point where we need the complexity of the whole animal to test these new treatments for cancer.
While news of Donald Trump's attack on American research might sound depressing, in December, the Sunday 7 brought you some really encouraging stories about some serious leaps forward in terms of technology and the impact it's having on people's lives. Elon Musk may be the world's greatest troll and the world's richest man, but his Neuralink company, which sees chips implanted into patients' brains, seems to be making dramatic progress. The intention is to allow patients who have lost the use of their limbs to control devices using the chip implanted in their brain. This week, video footage of one of the trial's patients, Rocky Stoutenberg, showed him controlling a robot arm. Rocky was paralysed in 2006, but if Neuralink passes the trial, it looks like there's huge potential for a real change in his life and those of many other patients. There's innovation going on elsewhere too, with BBC News covering the story of Dundee Sheriff Alistair Carmichael. He was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in 2024, which has seen him lose his voice, but he's been able to continue working because of some clever voice technology.
It's important to me to carry on doing this for as long as I can. Working gives me a focus away from MND, and it allows me to feel like I am still participating in society. MND is nasty, and nobody should have to face it alone. If I did not have this help, I would not be able to carry on working.
December also saw another groundbreaking development as Professor Iris Grunwald, who is chair of the neurobiology at the University of Dundee, carried out surgery from Scotland on a pig in Paris. The prospect of fully remote surgery could be hugely significant, allowing medical expertise to be available on a global scale. And Professor Grunwald said it's a huge moment.
This is the revolution that medicine has been waiting for. It is not science fiction anymore to treat a patient remotely. I'm performing the same procedure as I would in a patient, using the same kinds of tubings, of wires, as I would in a real patient. The only difference is that I'm controlling them from here. What is so amazing is that it feels exactly the same as if I was performing a real procedure on a patient. I have the same haptic feedback, the same wires and devices that I would use in reality. And if there is resistance, if there's any obstacle to overcome, I feel it immediately already here. It is transmitted to my hands and I can feel what it would feel like in the patient.
And there was a breakthrough which could have global impact, this time in Israel, where doctors pioneered surgery on the eye, developing a 3D printed cornea which could see patients treated without having to wait for a donor. Araya Bhatt is co-founder and CEO of Precise Bio, the company who have developed the technology, and he says the potential implications for those suffering corneal blindness is absolutely huge.
For every patient that receives today a corneal transplant in the world, there will be between 70 and 100 worldwide that will not receive. We're talking about over 12 million people in the world that will not receive a cornea and they'll go blind. It was a long journey. It's development of the cell biology and many technologies around that, technologies that are related to the printing technology, to the quality control. At Precise, we had to develop the capability, first of all, to have a production line that can be approved regulatory-wise, fully tested, and essentially all of these things have been developed over the last 10 years. And of course, this was done under the regulatory authorities' guidelines in collaboration with the clinicians, where all of these technologies that we have developed over the 10 years came into that specific minute that we transplanted this tissue into the human eye.
Professor David Zanuck is the Director of Ophthalmology Department at Shari Zedek Medical Centre in Jerusalem, and he's also a medical advisor for Precise Bio, and he says there's potential to mass produce replacement corneas.
This is the first time that a human being got a cornea, a printed cornea. This is not a cornea from a cadaver eye. This is a unique because this way we can manufacture 400 cornea from one cadaver cornea. So this is amazing. We can give the opportunity to thousands of patients to see again.
December also saw good news for the deaf and the hard of hearing, as a company called X-Ray Glass demonstrated their brilliantly simple idea of creating glasses which automatically provide subtitles on the lenses. They use real-time AI-generated captions, and it could be a game changer, according to Jack Bloomfield, the head of marketing at X-Ray Glass.
For those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or perhaps struggle to engage with the conversations around them, they can simply put on a pair of smart glasses and immediately see the words being said around them.
He says the company's founder, Dan Scarf, was inspired by his grandfather's hearing challenges.
So despite owning some of the world's best hearing aids, he was still struggling to engage with the conversations around him. It wasn't until that evening that he put captions on the TV and everyone saw that he was instantly engaged, and that's very much where the light bulb moment came from.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.